From one ethical consideration or ethical dilemma made worse by the internet, let's go to an even worse one. This is one, once again, brought to you by a political candidate seemingly from the internet. Should there be a right to have sex? Well, one congressional candidate believes so. This is from Alexandra M. Hunt at Hunt for Change, who shares some statistics from a Washington Post article from 2 years ago that purports to show that nearly a third of men under 30 have not had sex, and something like, X amount of men have not had sex even one time in the last year or something like that. Now, okay, would it shock you to learn that at one point in my life, I was someone who could go, let's say, a year without having sex? I know, it seems ridiculous. I've been there. Not the funnest time of my life, but I don't regard it as an imminent societal crisis that some guys are having a hard time getting laid. That being said, over the long term, if you just forget leaving sex aside, if you look at the overall loneliness and lack of human connection in particularly young people's lives, yeah, I would say that is that is not just somewhat, but very disturbing and does not augur well for civilization. But the problem is, what are the solutions to this? And Alexandra Hunt says, our society criminalizes sex and sweeps it under the rug. The consequences are straightforward. There is more violence. Since platforms like Craigslist were banned from advertising sex, serious violent crimes against all women, not just sex workers, has increased by nearly 1/5. And men who do not have sex suffer. They are less likely to be part of the labor force and more likely to experience depression, nihilism, and other mental health issues. The Me Too movement accomplished so much, and we have to take the next step. Normalize having healthy, positive, consensual sex. Decriminalizing sex work, funding sex education, and creating outreach programs that help young people develop healthy sexual habits. We should be moving toward a right to sex. People should be able to have sex when they feel they want to, and we need to develop services that meet people's needs without attaching the baggage of shame or criminalization.
So, okay. Yeah, so first of all, there's a little correlation versus causation. I don't think men are not joining the labor force because they don't have sex. That's just a symptom of an increasing amount of surplus males who are just not engaged in anything. I do think that augurs incredibly poorly. It's incredibly alarming and sad and fucked up. But I don't really think the answer is to make it more transactional either. Yeah. I mean, really, if there's not one policy you can do that instantly makes this better, but if I have to pick one, it's make smartphones illegal. That might help a little.
But that should be number one. Instead of trying to accommodate every budding pathology with some sort of market-based solution to essentially salve and bandage it, how about reduce the thing that is most accelerating all of the worst aspects of it, which is the fact that you can escape from the trap of sort of being this superfluous male by diving onto a goddamn telephone and living there, and in so doing, every day moving further and further away from being able to meaningfully relate to any other person in the world.
Right, and I don't I want to clarify, I don't think that cops should round up the consensual adults doing sex work, right? But I also don't think that's a solution.
No.
I don't think that necessarily makes guys less lonely. There's a gaping black hole at the center of this that isn't necessarily solved by all the decriminalization and legalization in the world.
Yeah, and we addressed this a little bit on the last episode about the Upper West Side congressional candidate who made published a video of himself on Pornhub working with a pro for his sex positive campaign, which is of legalizing sex work, is one of the chief planks of it. I would be in favor of decriminalizing sex work. I don't want to see women get arrested for it, but I don't believe it is a good idea to use sex work or sex workers as some sort of cure for how deeply alienated and hateful towards women men feel. If you're making it easier for men to just buy women to gratify themselves sexually, I don't think that will increase their overall, empathy or ability to form meaningful relationships later in life.
I mean, for this specifically, let's take the most alienated male men who feel the least connection to any social contract, saying, here's why you don't bash somebody's head in with a fucking hammer, and they should have priority to hire sex workers. That is like, that is dead woman central.
And I don't want to be too hard on Alexandra Hunt here, because I mean, just up until that last little turn at the end where she starts talking about like people should have the right to have sex when they want to. I agree. I think having a healthy sexual interests and meaningful romantic intimate relationships in life is like really one of the main parts about like what makes being alive worthwhile, and like having a healthy, thriving civilization. And to the extent that like people in young adulthood, men and women alike, are removing themselves or being removed from, or just like dropping out of consideration of being loved or experiencing sexual pleasure is deeply depressing. And obviously a shame-free, like healthy, broader attitudes in our society about sex would go a long way towards helping that. But here's the problem, though. When you start talking about and the Upper West Side congressional guy, Mike Itkis, had this on his campaign. He said, like, the right to privacy is not enough. We need to have the right to have sex. And I suppose, like, in the abstract, like, yeah, I agree. Like, I think people do have, like, I think you should not be, no one should be arrested or persecuted for having sex. Like, all of us, is a part of human life. It's one of the most fundamental parts of human life. And it's currently covered under the rubric of the right to privacy, meaning generally that what consenting adults do behind closed doors is nobody's business but their own. That right is very much in peril right now, thanks to this current Supreme Court and the Republican federal judges. We very well may see in the next year a constitutional right to privacy disappear, and with it, the ability to rely on the fact that you won't be arrested for your sexual preferences or just having sex in general. The problem with establishing a specific right to have sex is that it's not really having sex is not really an individual thing. What you're really talking about is like the shared rights of people in general, because you need another person to be having sex. Otherwise, it's just jerking off, right? So like, where does your right begin and another person's end? Like, that's the problem with establishing an idea that like, yeah, I have a right to have my sexual needs gratified by another person.
Yeah, I mean, it's in general, like, looking at the entire thing and only seeing the sex aspect is kind of missing the forest for the trees, right? It's missing that young people especially, like, okay, if you're a 25-year-old, most of your conscious memories now are affected by you essentially having a slot machine in your pocket that you play with 18 hours a day for most of your life. Human interaction since, like, let's say 2009 is completely antagonistic to any type of like social solidarity, mass politics, or just fun in any way that we understood it before. I think like the cards are kind of stacked against young people relating to each other as they would have for, as they would have in any other time in history. I mean, I can't imagine sort of coming of age and understanding your own sexuality while every moment or thing you say or thing you think is documented in this way that it never has been in human history. You add like increasingly dire economic mobility and just the constant degradation of life. The sex thing is all part of a piece, but yeah, I don't think you necessarily solve that by just declaring there's a right to have sex. That in practice translates to like, okay, you can hire somebody for an hour.
Because the any of the real causes cannot be politically addressed, so we can only address specific symptoms at their like most dire point, and so everyone has to, and eventually, just there's this fracturing towards whatever your specific like interest is for whatever reason, and then the only politics that seems possible is building some ameliorative regime of, at this point, because we're not reforming anything, we're not changing any structures, just legally allowing something that previously was banned, and then hoping that particular balm at least soothes some of the daily truly culturally personally destabilizing misery that accompanies the systemic immiserations.
Yeah, that it will be like that, like sex work would be for Generation Z and some millennials and everyone after. It would be for them what like Uber and Instacart are for millennials before them. Hey, everything sucks. Right. It's becoming more degrading. There's less of a chance that you advance a station or even replicate your parents' life. But we've allowed you to have this thing on demand that previously was a luxury for.
Yeah, like intimacy in the same way as food and shit.
Yeah.
But like, okay, I mean, like, I guess when it comes to like, I mean, what people are really talking about here, even though like men and women overall are having less sex and less fun than previous generations, because things are a lot less fucking fun now. But like, I mean, in terms of like a social problem, people, let's be honest, people are talking about young men, because like that's what people are afraid of, and that's what like these people are seeking to address. And I guess like, I know it's easy to make fun of incels, especially if they, hate women. And like, many of them are deserving of scorn. But like, there's a whole I feel like half of the popular commentators on the right now are basically just dating coaches for young men. And I'm wondering, like, do you think it's a problem for like the left side of the equation to just completely ignore this, or like or just to assume that like, any young man who's like unhappy and feels unfulfilled romantically is like, a piece of shit who should be written off entirely, rather than, I mean, like, look, I don't want to become a fucking dating coach or anything like that. I don't want to tell men how to be like, get laid but I mean, like, don't you think like there are so many young men out there who just like need some good advice? They need something real someone to tell them about like how they could maybe make their life better. And then most of the cases, how to make your life better at that age translates to success with the opposite sex, like how to attract women, how to be in a relationship.
I don't think it's good to ignore them. I mean, there's only going to be more like sort of surplus males that aren't engaged in anything and try to replicate the feeling of friends or community or sex or romance with just, the fake world that we've created on our phones that will only grow in scale as time goes on. Again, like, I don't know quite how that's done, though. I don't know quite how anyone anyone on the left would reach those people now. I think there's a formula to reach them, just kind of meeting them where they're at, as a lot of people on the right do. But doing it on a positive angle on a mass scale, I would be interested to see what that looks like.
I mean, I guess like it would start with just like, I think like the assumption that like if you're a young man who feels romantically unfulfilled or sort of like exiled from the world of sex and romantic possibility, that like that's a shitty feeling to have.
Yeah.
And like it's a shitty feeling to have, and it's not entirely your fault, or the things that have led to your condition that are your fault, or like it's not in a moral sense, but like that's the good news, is because like if it's things that you're doing that is leading to these outcomes, then you could very easily do other things that don't involve completely changing your personality, or growing a foot in height, or becoming like this alpha Chad stereotype or whatever. But that like it's for men or women, for anyone, like it is not fun to feel undesired, to feel just kind of invisible to society at large. And I guess like and like the way out of that is like, I don't know, like I think a lot of hatred of women that is the result of thwarted sexual ambition is just really it's the natural outgrowth of extreme self-hatred and rage that like needs to find an outlet or an excuse to any excuse other than like actively engaging in your own life for its own sake, not to like attract a better mate or be a more powerful individual, but to just like feel better about yourself. So when you get up in the morning and when you look at yourself in the mirror.
The hard thing is telling them that in some sense, though, that they still will be surplus males, right? You can't necessarily sell them the fantasy that they'll be gladiators or that they'll be top Gs or that they'll have a mailing list, whether it's like Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson or anyone else. The problem is that you're going to have to tell them at some point, you are still this discarded excess material in this current system, and we can't guarantee you that we're going to fix that. That's an innate problem with approaching it from that angle that I don't know how to solve.
I mean, yeah, there'd have to be a project. I mean, if you are honest about the real structural forces at play here, then the only real answer is like, okay, then what are we going to do what can I do to try to give my life some sort of meaning and shape by opposing this? And there is at the current moment nothing to do. There is nowhere to put that energy. The people who are offering a solution to it in the political realm are, of course, the most psychotic and cynical operators, because they'll tell you whatever you want to hear, obviously, and people are going to be taken in by that. Absent that, it becomes a personal challenge. Like, okay, how do I deal with this reality? And that is one of the real things that made Jordan Peterson this incredibly meteoric figure. For a minute, he was telling people, he was giving people a thing to do: tend your own garden. And when you look at him and his trajectory over the past couple of years and just becoming this completely non-functional weeping maniac who keeps having to be chained to radiators in Serbia, it's because you can only clean your room so many fucking times, and if nothing else changes, you're left in the same position you were before, but even more bereft now, because your plan of action, your actual attempt to take control of things, did not have the results you wanted it to.
I mean, I think what's going on is that, like, like on these sort of like male lifestyle guru figures on the right, I mean, I think that they are selling a lie that if you just like use my promo codes and send me money or listen to all my podcasts or whatever, that like, you have a chance to become part of the male elect, like that top echelon of like fucking alpha superstar fucking Chad, like they're selling the lie that you can be like them and that you could have like a harem of women and be a rich baller. I mean, but we all know that's not the case, and like they're depending on the fact that like none of these guys are ever going to be like that. But the thing is, like, you don't have to be, and I think the thing that's in a lot of these guys' heads that's holding them back is that, especially for young men, like guys who are in their like late teens, early 20s, like college years, I think like they're not interested in sex so much as the status that it confers, and the status of having a high tier, high status woman, like the Perfect 10 smoke show. And I mean, I hate to put in too crude of a terms here, but like everyone could fucking benefit from lowering their standards just a little.
Yeah,
fucking
absolutely.
bit. Just a little fucking bit. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I think that these guys who are like unfuckable wretches, like, okay, here's the thing: if you're heterosexual, you do not have to do a lot of work to make yourself attractive enough to like have sex with a woman. That's a bare minimum right there. You do not have to clear too many hurdles to get yourself from unfuckable wretch to like wood, right? But I don't think these guys want sex with like the real women who are in their life or that could conceivably like might be go on a date with them. They want to be, I think largely because of smartphones and fucking the internet and pornography, they only want like what in their head is like the perfect 10 woman that they feel entitled to. And it's like nobody is entitled to that, man. Like, and if you and if you end up with someone inordinately attractive and more attractive than you are, then good for you for whatever reason. But the idea is that like, I don't think they want sex with a real woman. I think that's why most of these guys are just turning to cartoons to mediate their sexuality, because like the possibility of a real woman, I think, kind of disgusts them. And like if sex or romance or just, let's be honest, having love in your life is something that you're interested in, then I think you people have got to get out of their fucking heads with this shit.